This is Antonio Moore coming to you from Tone Talks. I have Yvette Carnell from Breaking Brown from Your Black World, and we're here to discuss like a great topic of the day, which is the Fourth Amendment decision that came down from the Supreme Court. And Yvette, you want to say hi to the audience?
Oh, hello everybody. Hello Breaking Brown family. Hello Your Black World family. And whoo, we got something to talk about today.
Yeah, I have to say that as well. You know, my background, just so everybody knows, is I'm an attorney. Also, I'm a former prosecutor here in Los Angeles. So, really, this decision, and now I practice criminal defense. This decision, it's a big one, and it hasn't been covered in the media much. And we wanted to give this a chance to give some context for Black America, and just get a discussion going on between myself and Yvette. Again, the Fourth Amendment, just to read it out loud, just so everybody knows, is the right of the people to be secure in their persons, house, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. And so, what happened this week on Monday is a decision came down, and that decision effectively gutted this in many ways by allowing officers to use arrest warrants to hide behind illegal search and seizures. And Yvette, you want to say anything on it as I start to explain?
I think I'm going to let you explain first, so that we can give people a sense of like what this means. And once you do that, I think I'll jump in and see if I can just clarify, because I don't think people understand. I'm hearing a lot about LeBron James. I'm hearing a lot about Steph Curry and all this stuff, and I don't think you understand like what just happened.
Yeah, I agree, and also even guns. I mean, you're hearing a lot about a lot of other topics, but this here, as Pascal Robert has told us both, in his opinion, is the largest decision for Black America since Plessy v. Ferguson. It is so impactful in terms of their ability, meaning the police, to circumvent search and seizure rules, to basically find evidence on people because they have arrest warrants. And we'll go through arrest warrants and why they're so problematic in terms of using those as the threshold, and use some context. So to explain what happened, I'm going to use the New York Times. They did a piece called "Another Hit to the Fourth Amendment," and this is a section. On Monday, the Supreme Court further weakened the Fourth Amendment by making it even easier for law enforcement to evade its requirement that stops be based on reasonable suspicion. The justices ruled 5-3 that a police officer's illegal stop of a man on the street did not prevent evidence obtained from a search connected to that stop to be used against him. The case, Utah versus Street, started when the police in Salt Lake City got an anonymous tip of drug activity at a house. An officer monitoring the house became suspicious at the number of people he saw entering and leaving. When one of those people, Edward Steve, left to walk to a nearby convenience store, the officer stopped him and asked for his identification. A routine check revealed that Mr. Steve had an outstanding small traffic warrant. The officer arrested him based on that earlier warrant, searched him, and found drugs in his pocket. And essentially what happened is that the state made the argument that they agreed that the initial stop was illegal, but because it was based on reasonable individual suspicion that Mr. Steve was doing nothing wrong, instead the state argued that the discovery of the valid warrant and the legal stop got around the Fourth Amendment. And what's interesting about the history of this case is that the Supreme Court of Utah actually disagreed with them. So this decision is the United States Supreme Court going against the Utah Supreme Court, which actually said that evidence should not have been allowed. So it's even more, I guess you could say, egregious or strong in that sense, is that they're not even siding with the state in this case. They're making an outright decision.
No, they're basically saying I said this earlier. Like, we officially live in a police state. We, in terms of, we've been talking about surveillance and Edward Snowden and all that stuff for a long time, right? How the police how authorities can just tap your phone and do whatever. Now they're saying, let's go a step further. They can't only just tap your phone. Like, there's no more like the evidence is not admissible because you didn't have probable cause, blah, blah, blah. No, none of that. Like, if a police stops you for something, and small as a warrant, and what I want to say to people, think about that. It's like they said in the article, this is a small warrant. This isn't like this man was wanted for robbing or killing or pulling a knife on somebody. No, this is a small warrant. So, like, when you think about American life right now, where everything is illegal, where we have this overcriminalization, where anything can land you in court, anything, unpaid tickets can get you a warrant. So many things can get you a warrant. What that means is that all of us, kind of live at the behest of police, because who knows if they got an outstanding warrant for some BS. I don't know if I had a parking ticket or something, or a speed ticket, and now that ticket's a warrant. I could have moved. A lot of things happen all the time, and a lot of times people get warrants for small stuff just because they can't pay or whatever the case may be. So you're telling me now that I can get that because I have a small warrant, that I don't really, or anything, I don't really have any rights anymore. Stopping, I don't think people understand. It's like stop and frisk is now legal. Like,
and what I'm trying to do is get some of the facts out of the way before I start giving my opinion. One of the things that I think really contextualizes this is to look back at Ferguson, which is, we were heavy on a year and a half ago. Sean King did a piece called Ferguson, an apartheid police state. 21,000 residents have a staggering 16,000 open arrest warrants. So this is a section from Sean King's article from Black Lives Matter. With just 21,000 residents, Ferguson issued a staggering 32,000 arrest warrants for at least 16,000 different people. Not just parking tickets, Ferguson averaged 567 non-traffic related court cases per 1,000 residents, far and away the highest of any town in the state, and more than twice as much as the town with the second highest average. To put that into perspective, the city of St. Louis had 80 non-traffic court cases per 1,000 residents, and that's actually above the state average for Missouri. So fundamentally, if you were to look at Ferguson, what this means for a place like Ferguson is almost 70% of the residents can be searched at any time. And I think that when you start to deal with the context of how and why arrest warrants have been issued in some of these places, as we've exposed in Ferguson for economic reasons, particularly when it comes to African Americans and Latinos, I think that the devastation that this decision has on Black life, particularly Black life in places like Ferguson, but Black life all across the country, bar none, is crazy. And it's crazy that it's not getting the kind of coverage that it should be getting right now. 16,000 open arrests on 21,000 residents. That means only 5,000 people get to use the Fourth Amendment. That's what this case basically comes down on.
Yeah, I'm not so sure how much they get to use it. I mean, it's because I have a reasonable suspicion. I think I can see them now. I have a reasonable suspicion because you're in a community of people that has 80% warrant. So I suspect you probably got a warrant just by the fact that you're here in this city. So I just don't think, in terms of where we are, that people really get, that Black people really get, that, it used to be a time where you felt like you could ask a cop. Like, if you were in a community, even if it was a poor community, whatever, you could say, hey, what are you stopping me for? I think that day is over. You don't get to do that anymore.
So just so everyone kind of understands on a structural level what this means. Essentially, you're walking down the street and you leave a house, say, that has drugs. You don't have paraphernalia hanging out of your pockets. You're not smoking and smoke's coming up in the air. The officer at that point can't stop you. What was happening before the case is if that officer did stop you, if he found things on you and you did not consent, you did not say, you can search me, that was found to be an illegal stop. And as a result, whatever he found, even if he found the drugs on you after that stop, that was not admissible. What happens now is that in that same scenario, say you have a traffic warrant, whether you know it or not, whether you know you have it or not. Say you got a warrant, like in Ferguson, they were giving warrants for people having cars in the driveway and then not going to court. Say you have a warrant of that type on you or anything higher. If he finds those same drugs, that becomes admissible. What this does is it essentially opens up a whole new doorway where officers can do backstories on people and know whether they have warrants and then violate their rights. That's what happened here. This officer actually looked this man up, Street, and he knew that this man had a warrant. And essentially, what should have happened, as the Utah Supreme Court agreed, is that evidence should have been deemed inadmissible because he didn't have cause for the stop. And so, Sotomayor wrote a scathing dissent. Well, actually, let's before we deal with the dissent, let's deal with the actual decision. The decision itself was written by Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas stepped up as a sort of lion for the right. You know, we did a video before that you can look back on the Supreme Court. And we wondered who was going to be this lion, and so Clarence Thomas put his face and his handprint all over this, and wrote the decision. So for you, I guess I'm going to ask, what is the impact of having an African American male write the decision that will impact so many African American male lives in a negative way?
I mean, well, that's what he's there for. I mean, that's what Clarence Thomas, that's his job. And I think Clarence Thomas is known, you know, for a long time that's his job. You know, I'm going to be covered for white people. I'm going to be the person that's going to put my hand on that. So you can't say it's racist. How you going to say it's racist? It's written by a black person. You know, how can you say that? How can you say that, you know, this is something that's detrimentally, oh, this court is racist? And, you know, you and I talked about this, that black people gave Clarence Thomas cover when he came in. You know, he's one of us. You know, I always tell people that old proverb or whatever. You know, when the tree saw the axe coming into the wood, it said it's one of us. You know, so you know, I think that is one of the you know, going to Obama. We don't have to just take this to Thomas. Even with go to Obama, that's one of the things that we're going to have to revisit. This idea that, you know, putting this pigmentation politics and putting somebody in a position because they have, you know, they look like us and sound like us is going to be beneficial. Here, this guy is rubber stamping something that for me means kind of like, you know, the worst thing possible for black men in this country. You think stop and frisk was something? You think all that stuff was something? Now we got a whole bunch of people that are going to come into the system. And I used to think that, okay, mass incarceration, because of all the work we've done to stop mass incarceration, that's going to be something. You know, we're going to reduce mass incarceration. I don't think that anymore. I think we're looking towards an escalation.
Yeah, and it's a trip because first with Clarence Thomas, you know, so many blacks come out now and like make this judgment. But like we created him, and we created the good black, the bourgeoisie of classism in Black America, and in a lot of ways, in creating him, we created the logic with which he decided this case. You know, he decided this case. The officer's lack of any specific suspicion of Mr. Steve, Justice Thomas wrote, was a result of good faith mistakes. The illegal stop was at worst an isolated instance of negligence. He decided this case without dealing with the realities of policing in our nation today, and how policing clearly can have so much bias. And in this case, the surrounding facts seem to indicate that being the case with the lack of cause for the actual stop, and how the officer went about actually investigating this particular scenario.
Well, it's kind of ridiculous. Like, there's no such thing as good faith where the policing of black communities is concerned. There is no good faith. There hasn't been any good faith. I don't know if there's ever been good faith. But even if you look back in the 60s, it's never been good faith. Look at the amount of white people who do drugs versus the amount of black people who do drugs. And it's never been higher. There's never been a time where there are more black people doing drugs than white people, like in terms of percentage-wise. So when you look at that and you look at how much black people are stopped, especially black men, and arrested, there is no good faith. Good faith doesn't exist. So when you say, well, this was good faith, I mean, it's just a lie. Like, you just put that in there in your decision, and it's a total lie. And history doesn't back up any of that, but he doesn't care. Like, this is his thing. To, like, he is part of the mechanism put in place to ensure that the ruling class get what they want. And what the ruling class wants right now is to stop hearing about black people. We don't want to hear no more about Black Lives Matter. We don't want to hear no more about mass incarceration. We don't want to hear no more about that. As a matter of fact, I'm going to step it up. Because there are no more jobs. So what you going to do? If you don't go to jail, what are you going to do? There's no space for you here.
And it's a trip because I have this conversation quite regularly with you, and I've written on it extensively. You know, largely the incarceration of America, the over-incarceration, has been carried by African-American men and some Latino men. You know, and I don't think America understands that. Like women just don't go to jail much. Don't get me wrong, black women are on probation at far too high a rate. But as far as actual jail numbers in the whole country, there's about 60,000 African-American women in jail. 70,000 white women. Now, proportionally to white women, of course, like, you know, there's only 20 million black women and there's 60,000 in jail. And there's somewhat around, I think, 90 million, 80 million white women, and 70,000 are in jail, proportionally, of course. But when you look at black males, there's almost like a million, like 850,000 in jail or prison. and there's only 20 million black men. I'm saying this not to create like kind of like a Olympics of struggle, but more so to contextualize what we might see is an escalation in a number of other people that go to jail. And you know, for a long while, the pitch has been, well, black men must do better. And it'll become an interesting conversation as the arrest warrants are used to incarcerate other people. Because when we look at this particular case in front of us, the Steve case, this was a white man. And so, like, you might start seeing the institution of this against poor white folks, against black women, against many other groups that didn't bear the brunt of incarceration's full hammer the way that African American males did in this first version.
Well, I think you're going to see a few things. I think you're right. I think you're going to see one. This isn't just mass incarceration in terms of, you know, this is something that we've probably never seen before. I think you're going to see what you can only call like the disappearing of black men. Like, it's almost like black men are finished right now. And I think you're going to see an increased number of black women and an increased number of white poor. Because what happens is there's no place for poor people. There's no place for poor people. So since blacks are disproportionately poor, black men are disproportionately poorer, you know, and unemployable because they have all these stigmas that surround them. Oh, you're lazy. You don't know how to take care of your family. You're irresponsible. You have all of these stigma around black men. So it's been really easy to put black men in jail because they're caricatured as like nothing. Like, you don't even deserve to live. You don't have anything that benefits America. That's the way black men have been caricatured. Okay, so you're going to see an escalation of that because nobody cares anyway. Nobody, I mean, let's be honest. Nobody's caring.
And that's, you know, and not to segue the conversation too far, and that's what's so interesting about LeBron James, and I've written extensively on this. We need to stop it and understand the real role of these sports. It's like, come on, man. Black people are suffering. Black men are suffering in a way we haven't seen, arguably, in any society in a long time. I mean, don't get me wrong. We have third world countries, definitely any first world country in a long time. And what it does is it makes people calm about it all. You know, because you average it in your head whether you don't mean to or not. Because you saw LeBron James on Sunday, and you know that he makes millions of dollars. The fact that, you know, every other LeBron in America lives a very, very poor life, you kind of like dismiss that almost like subconsciously. And I think that is the damaging effect, and that is the true role of the sport itself. It's not about entertainment as much as it is about calming effects. Because this is real. This decision that came down the day after that big finals game is real than a mug, and it's going to affect a lot of people in the term. And you know, the other thing I wanted to touch on is there's these stories going around that Clarence Thomas is possibly going to retire. You know, and with him retiring, then there will be 2 seats that this next president will have to pick. What do you think about Clarence Thomas retiring? Are you ready for him to retire as the black face on the court? I am.
I am ready for him to retire just because, listen, I need a contrast. Like, if this kind of stuff is going to be done to black people, I just need it to just come from white people. So black people can see what's happening. Like, the thing about it when it's coming from black people, I think we've kind of woken up from Thomas, but it's almost as if it softens us. Like, when it comes from Obama, it kind of softens us because we still have a soft spot because in our minds, you know, he's still family. Clarence is still family, even though he's confused. He don't love himself. That's self-hate, blah, blah, blah. And we're getting all this psychological stuff, but it really don't matter.
All that matters is the effect on people's lives. It's going to go down. This is real. And you know, it's funny because you go back to what you said, because you slid Obama in there. There's a great piece in Salon. I'll pull it up for you guys right now. And Salon.com did it on Obama's pick Garland. They saying that Obama's pick Garland would have went with this decision as well. The decision split 5-3 on the Supreme Court case. And we had one liberal justice, Breyer, who actually went with the conservatives. What that did is that indicated that this is a stronger decision than normal. And to have a liberal decide with the conservatives on this issue at this time, it's just devastating. And so, like, when we look at Obama conceding to the Republicans and giving them a centered right kind of justice to pick from is bogus. And you know, I wish that Obama would take his pick back. Let's just wait and see, because I think, you know, it looks like Hillary's gonna win. Hillary put out a strong liberal, at least a left-leaning liberal, because I mean, when you deal with the reality that Garland would have most likely, based on his ruling history, ruled the same way, I don't need that justice.
Yeah, I know. I agree. I totally agree with you. But I mean, let me just go back to a minute to LeBron James. You know, LeBron James is a basketball player, and I'm just gonna say this because it's true. LeBron James is a mutant. I mean, he is. Do we all know that he's 6'8"? Saying that my kid is gonna be LeBron James is like, let's say we had a sport for small people. You know, people we used to call midgets, but they're small people now. You know, the politically correct thing to say. It's small people. Let's say that's like if we had a sport for small people that they had to fit between stuff, and we used them in that way. And then we said, oh man, I hope I have a kid that's 4'8" so he can do this. Like, you see how insane that is? Like, it don't make any sense. Like, no, these people are different. Like, you know, your kid's not going to be that kid, probably. And if he does, it's like going in and, like we always talk about, playing the lotto, going in and getting a Mega Millions and winning. Like, that's not anything that you should be striving for. So, just the insanity of thinking that your kid is going to be like this 6'8" Goliath in the first place. And then he has to be a 6'8" Goliath who's semi-coordinated or whatever. Like, you know, this idea that that's something that we look up to and pay attention to, you know, is just almost insane and from where I sit right now.
Well, I think that the larger context of it for me is the reality that it encompasses your entire being, where you know nothing about this decision on Monday, but everything about Game 7 on Sunday, to the point where you don't even understand Game 7. That's a redundancy. It'll happen next year just like last year. But this decision that just came down about arrest warrants, especially if you sit there and watch this game with an arrest warrant, means you better run to court and get that arrest warrant off you, because they catch you on the street at any time that they want and basically search and seize things without true cause. And so, like, you know, one of the last things I guess I wanted to deal with is the regionality of this issue, because I think that that's kind of being missed as well. And we just kind of went over it in the Ferguson article. If you notice that St. Louis had substantially lower arrest warrant ratios compared to Ferguson. Just to kind of like go back and tag on it, it said the city of St. Louis had 80 non-traffic cases per 1,000 residents, whereas Ferguson averaged 567 non-traffic related court cases per 1,000 residents. And I think that one of the things that this decision really does is it should trigger a migration out of these small places because of how they use arrest warrants in such a accounting economic kind of way, rather than a criminal, like rather than a way to actually deal with criminality. And so when we look at black people living in Ferguson, black people living in small towns, I'm just wondering whether this decision is really like a question for them, where they should get out of Dodge.
Well, yeah, you can get out of Dodge, but the problem that we have in so many places that we don't have the money to get out of Dodge. We don't have the money to move anywhere. That's why I laugh when I hear people say, well, why don't you move to communities where they make more money? How you know how much it costs to move and relocate?
Well,
you know?
But this is the thing, Yvette. The same thing is this, like, you know, survival is survival. You know, and the thing is, if they're issuing arrest warrants, and then I'm going to run a video at the end of this clip so you guys can kind of see, but if they're issuing warrants and then they have court every month, once a month, and it takes you like 3 weeks to get your warrant off. If you're living under such immense pressure, I think this might actually create the environment where you got to do a cost analysis of whether you can stay there anymore in a way that we haven't had before.
I think in order for that to happen, I think, and this is something that I've said for a long time, black people are going to have to think collectively. I don't think you as one or two people, it's going to have to be like me and Jimmy and his wife and them people, we all moving. And we're going to take all of our coins and like stay in the same house until we figure out, until we get to where we got to go and find someplace, you know, until we, you know, and look up someplace that's good and find it. Like, this whole thing of black people viewing themselves as individuals, that's over. Like, you had a small window to do that, and you probably shouldn't have been doing it then. But this whole thing where I'm an individual and I'm going to go out here and get my thing and do my thing, that's stuff that white people get to do. You don't get to do that. So these big moves you're going to make now, like, that's the only way you can secure yourself is being with other people who may have a little bit and you have a little bit and you put it together. You don't have enough to do that kind of stuff by yourself. So that's going to have to be a rethinking of what it means to be black in America.
Yeah, because, I mean, when you look at it, one of the things that really got uncovered with Ferguson is these towns are economically, they're economically insufficient without black failure. So essentially, they need people to have arrest warrants to fund the town. And so, like, if the arrest warrant that they need you to have also has the repercussion of you having no rights under the Fourth Amendment, it's a hard push to stay there. I mean, and so, you know, similar to what we saw when we saw the Great Migration out of the South, you know, when so many blacks were running away from whites, I think we might see that here. And I'm not saying overnight, but I think that, you know, when you start looking at small police stations, realizing the power of this decision and enacting it, you might start to see this pattern start to develop across the country.
Well, I think with black people who are middle class, I think you might start seeing people look again, and I was talking to Pascal about this, whether they want to lead a country. I mean, this country has become, you know, even, you know, we're seeing a retrograde. We're seeing us go backward in terms of the hostility towards blackness. And I think you have to ask yourself, you know, can I live here? You know, and most people can't. Like, most working class people can't leave. But I think amongst, you know, the upper echelons of the black community, I think you're going to see people say, hey, if I can find something to do elsewhere, I need to figure it out. I need to figure out what I have to do.
Yeah, and I'm going to give you the last word, but what I am going to say is what you're dealing with, in my mind, is blackness wants to be something other than what blackness was defined as in this country. And as that starts to happen, it clashes against the need for whiteness to have blackness as an underclass. And so when I say that, I mean, if you want to live in Ferguson and not have an arrest warrant and send your kids to school and go to church, how we going to live as white people? We need our judge's salary for $200,000. We need you to want a lawyer and need a bail bondsman. We need you, a predatory victim. We need you to be a predatory victim for us to live the way we live. And that has been the body of blackness for so long. And now blacks are becoming aware and they want to retain blackness but not be a predatory victim. And as that starts to happen, maybe we do have to start coming to that hard question that Pascal and you have dealt with. And I'll give you the last.
Well, no, I think you're exactly right. I think if there's one thing people need to walk away with this, is that how much their dreams fly in the head of and contradict what America is. Like, I think what you just said now, if you boil it down, is that, you know, America runs on black failure. So for you to say you want to live like white people means that white people can't live like white people. Like, the white people who are doing okay can't live like that if you succeed. So that's why this whole carrot and stick thing don't work. That's why looking at LeBron don't work, because they just need LeBron out there so you won't riot so much, so you'll be okay, so you'll believe that opportunity exists for you. But really and truthfully, LeBron don't represent you. Like, you going to prison creates jobs, you know, for like we were talking about. That creates jobs for the people who are in there watching over you. That creates jobs for the builders. You having arrest warrants creates jobs for white people. You having to get locked up, you know, and having to go to court creates jobs. You know, that's judges, all that stuff. Like, you have to, that's your job. Your failure is their money. You not having a bank account is payday loans, all of that stuff. So you have to understand, like, we're here as black people just to make life easier. We've always been like a servant class, but now we're not slaves anymore. So they got to find a way to, like, make money off of us, because that's why we're here.
All right. And, you know, everybody should read up on this Fourth Amendment decision. It was huge. All you got to do is type in Fourth Amendment on Google. I'm going to leave out on a video today, and I want you to watch it. Huffington Post covered Ferguson, just so you can see how people are actually getting warrants there, how their courts run, and like how these people actually have to go through heaven and hell to get the warrants off of them, like standing outside in 12-degree weather in front of a house that serves as the courthouse. And thank you again, Yvette, for coming on. And
no problem.
Please subscribe to Tone Talks.
Are the people who have been pulling us over because we're black and exploiting us because we're poor for 50 years. You can typically expect to see predominantly black folks in the court as defendants, as pro se defendants, and predominantly white people who are the judge, prosecutor, and police officers.
Tonight you had about, I could count, about 2 or 3 whites, all the rest is blacks.
People trying to get this stuff taken care of, warrants, old warrants or whatever, and then they got to come out and stand in the code. That's not right. They ain't gonna give them no hot chocolate or nothing, Yeah, this is a house here. That's unprofessional.
All the money they making,
for real.
they could steal
Did you say
anything they want out of here.
Did you say they had like 300 warrants, traffic warrants out?
Oh, no, more than 30. Oh,
3,000?
no.
5,000.
33.
33,000.
This is the worst in
right
Come
here.
on, and this is a small municipality. How the fuck they got 33,000 warrants out?
The courts are often the second highest source of revenue for their town. Ferguson, for instance, it's $2.7 million a year they make on their courts. Others, it's even more than that.
I think all these small municipalities need to be investigated. I just found out that this municipality alone has 33,000 warrants issued when there's only 1,200 people that populate the area.
They literally sit on the street and wait till they find something to pull you over for. So they're definitely targeting people.